invisible from our constituents. Most of that work it happens in Ottawa. However, I have the privilege of being in Ottawa and seeing how hard working my colleagues from Brampton are. So I want to say that because it's with your support and with your collaboration that their hard work in Ottawa has the biggest impact in the lives of our families here in this area. So thank you. May I also signal that I come from Quebec City, as Sonia said, and in Quebec City we're used to heavy snow. So I appreciate the kind thought that you had for me this morning of inviting some snow so I can feel more comfortable to be with you this morning. I appreciate again the kindness that you've shown to me. And I'm here in familiar surroundings as well, because I'm here in a community where the middle class is very important to growing not only businesses and opportunities for workers, but making our society more inclusive. So with the help and the collaboration of my dear and much appreciated colleagues in Ottawa, we're working very hard to make sure that every Canadian has a fair and real chance to succeed in life. It's the key reason for which next week's budget will be so important in developing our agenda around middle class Canadians, supporting and helping to grow the middle class, as well as helping more Canadians enter that middle class. Sonia has already mentioned a couple of the important steps we took last year, in last year's budget, in bringing a more inclusive society, a society again where everyone has the ability to contribute, to improve economic growth and the lives of families and communities. Next week's budget will be exactly on the same themes. So the themes of economic development that develops the middle class, development that is sustainable from a financial but also from an environmental perspective, and inclusive development that leaves no one behind. So very briefly, before I turn to you for questions, comments and reactions, to which I think all of you will be delighted to react, let me elaborate a bit more on some of the measures that we took last year and which we hope to confirm next week, and then I may elaborate on what we should be hearing as broad themes for next week's budget. So the Canada Child Benefit is the most significant social policy innovation in an entire generation. In Brampton South, which Sonia I think had the privilege to represent, the families of about 24,000 children are now receiving, since July, additional support of about $200 per month, non-taxable, in addition to the support they would have gotten under the earlier system. That's a big impact in the lives of many families in Brampton South. $200 per month for many families represents a significant additional support to grow their families, to look after the housing costs, the child care costs, the food costs, the transportation costs, the educational costs, that all families often find difficult to meet. It also means that we're not sending checks to families of millionaires anymore, but we feel this is all right because over the last decades, higher income Canadians have done relatively well. Those that are struggling are middle class and lower income Canadians. So we feel that not sending checks to families of millionaires anymore is the right thing to do if we can, and as we do, support 9 families out of 10 to a greater extent. So 9 families out of 10, in Sonia's writing, that means the families of 24,000 children. Now, in addition to that, in Ontario, and in this particular neighborhood in particular, because of a more simple, a more fair child benefit system, we are taking out of poverty 40 children out of 100 currently living in poverty. So that means that 40% of children currently living in poverty in Ontario and in Brampton are being lifted out of poverty. That's a big thing, because we know how important it is for early learning and early family conditions, how important those conditions are for the welfare of children, not only when they are children, but also for their future ability to be educated and to be well trained, and therefore to contribute to greater economic growth for Canada and the region. Seniors, extremely important. Many seniors in our communities are anxious towards the fact that their income is relatively fixed, but the cost of meeting essential purchases of goods and services, the cost of such essential goods and services is rising. So in Sonia's riding in particular, we are, since last July, we're giving up to $1,000 more per vulnerable senior for about 2,400 seniors in her riding. $1,000 may not seem much to high-income families, but for a vulnerable senior, it can mean a lot in the ability of seniors to be and to do well in life. Finally, the fact that we have increased taxes on the top 1% of Canadian earners in order to reduce taxes on middle-class Canadians. Again, Brampton is such an ideal place to see how important middle-class families are to the life of our community. So it means that 9 million overall in Canada, 9 million middle-class taxpayers are paying less taxes because we have chosen to ask a bit more to the top 1% of Canadians. Now, next week's budget will continue those measures to help to support and grow middle-class Canadians and take more Canadians out of poverty and into the middle class. But there will be other themes that you will see develop in next week's budget. Innovation is going to be an important theme. Innovation in southern Ontario, again in this region in particular, is key to economic development, is key to growing our middle-class Canadians. You'll see next week that we are committed to developing this innovation agenda. You'll see also strong investments in infrastructure, in public infrastructure. The Canadian government has responsibility to provide appropriate public infrastructure. Again, that's very important in the context of communities like this one, where public transit, where transportation infrastructure, more generally speaking, where green infrastructure for clean water, clean air, sewage, appropriate municipal facilities, where that infrastructure makes a big impact in the lives of everyone, but particularly so in the lives of middle-class and lower-income Canadians. And finally, you'll see next week important investments in people, in workers. We know that middle-class Canadians, when they identify themselves as middle-class, look at their current income, the cost of essentials, but also consider whether they feel confident about the future. Confidence is very important in the well-being of our middle-class families. Middle-class families are families that feel confident in their future and in the future of their children. So, and one aspect of their anxiety is around work. Precarious work, the risk of losing a job and not being able to find one, the risk of being outskilled when one loses a job, not being able to find a new one because that person doesn't have the skills required for the changing labor market. So in next week's budget, you also see quite an agenda around upskilling and assisting those Canadians that need to transition from one job to another. So again, I don't want to be too long. I wanted to show you that next week's budget is going to be along the agenda of last year's budget. We'll be pushing, however, harder around infrastructure, innovation, and workers. And again, may I express my gratefulness to all of these great MPs that I have the fortune of seeing more often than you do, perhaps, in Ottawa, in the House of Commons. They work very hard for the community, and again, I appreciate the support you're providing to them.